Hey, what's going on? This is the Doug Show. Welcome. I'm Doug Cunnington, and in this interview, I'm going to talk to Dave Schneider. Dave's an old friend of mine, and he recently sold his SaaS company, that's software as a service, Ninja Outreach. So I bet a lot of you listening may have heard of Ninja Outreach, which is basically influencer outreach software. And cool thing is, Dave and I were in a mastermind group back in the day, like roughly around the time that I was getting started online, like 2013, 2014, and Dave was getting started as well. So it's good to hear how, he took a different path. He took a different route to get to where he is now. And it was just cool catching up with him. He started doing a travel blog, and that's initially when we met. And he made some mistakes over time, like we all do. So he shares a lot of those. And we talk about a few other things, like how he stays motivated and some of the projects he's working on now. This interview is kind of interesting to me because, number one, Dave's a friend of mine, and I have known him since I got started. But Dave and I also met in person at least a couple times. I can't remember what was first, but we met in the like Boston area, somewhere in Massachusetts up there. My wife and I and Brody, our old dog at the time, he and I. He, being Dave, we met up at a bar. He was just a couple towns over. Had a couple beers there, as I like to do, and I think we walked our dogs together too. I think we met at a park and walked around, and my wife Elizabeth joined us as well. So it was cool catching up. And Dave and I actually worked on a couple projects together as well, or at least one project that it was like a side project that we like basically. We quit. I'll put a link to that story in the description. So if you're interested in hearing about that, let me know. Actually, I could probably get Dave back on the line and we could just talk about that as well. But so we met one time in the Boston area, and then another time we met as he and his now wife were traveling through the Atlanta area. So they were driving through Georgia. They're big travelers, and especially during that period of their lives, they were traveling a ton. So they were kind of going through the general area that we were at. So he and his girlfriend stopped by, girlfriend at the time, wife now, and they stopped for lunch. So we chatted, and I think they came over for a couple hours to maybe catch up on some work. In the home office there. So anyway, let's get to the interview now that I'm rambling on. And thanks a lot, Dave. Everyone be sure to check out Dave's current projects now, which are you can get to them at daveschneider.me, lesschurn.io, and growthpros.io. So those are a few links, and you can get to them in the description. Hey, what's up? Doug Cunnington here from Niche Site Project. I'm talking with my friend Dave Schneider. How are you?
Doing well, Doug. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. So thanks a lot for joining me today. And for the people that don't know you, can you give us a little bit of an intro, who you are and what you're working on? And then we'll kind of go into the whole backstory after that.
Sure. I've been working online for, about 5 or 6 years now, I guess. It started, I was doing some traveling that kind of led to digital nomading. That kind of led to maybe working a bit more full-time online. Messed around with a lot of different things, probably like, any entrepreneur. But I guess my, claim to fame, although it's not hardly, too famous, would be starting and growing Ninja Outreach, which was a influencer marketing software, in the digital marketing space, which I sold this year in March. And since then, I got married and basically I've just been relaxing a little bit.
Cool. Congrats, by the way. I know you just got married recently. So
thanks
cool.
very much.
And let's go back to the beginning, because you and I sort of got started online around the same time. And it's really cool. Our sort of group of people that we came up with, we all sort of separated, did different things, but everyone did well. And it's, when did you sell Ninja Outreach, by the way?
It was March of this year, 2018.
Okay, cool. So you worked on that for a while, you sold it, but you came from like a lot of people getting started. I know like Pat Flynn started with like affiliate marketing and some smaller sites. And I think like Mark Manson and a couple other like big names started with like niche sites essentially. So tell us how you kind of found your way into the travel area and then that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I'm kind of going back to 2012, and technically even before that, but you have to start somewhere. And basically, my now wife and I had agreed that we wanted to go traveling, backpacker style, kind of quit our jobs, save up some money, go to Asia, and just kind of go do that for like a year. And a year, the plan at least became two pretty quickly. And once we were out there, we decided we wanted to have a travel blog. It was mainly a way to keep in touch with friends and family, but we also thought in the back of our minds that maybe we could make a little bit of money off of it. At a minimum, we could maybe review some different activities and places, and that would get discounts, and that would help us sort of prolong our travel budget. So little did I know that there was a whole world, probably still is, of link selling, which is when you basically sell a link on your own website. My guess is your audience knows exactly why someone would want to do this, so I won't elaborate too much. But basically, you buy links on people's website to get the SEO sort of authority, and that helps you rank higher in the organic search engines for particular terms. So we work with companies like Expedia who wanted to rank for cheap flights to Miami, for example, and we'd have to find ways to include that in our blog posts. And that was our first sort of introduction into online marketing, so to speak, working online where somebody's kind of paying you and you're doing the whole thing from your laptop. And we did that for years. I mean, we did that for probably like 2 or so years. And it really it became sort of a way for us to replace our previously full-time incomes. To the extent that we thought, why go back and, try to get a job in the corporate world again? Why not see what we can kind of continue from this? So once we started with that mentality that we wanted to be online entrepreneurs, we started thinking about new business ideas. We got into, we did a few things with niche sites a bit, but I was looking for something that I felt was going to be more stable. Because the link selling business seemed very, up and down and very dependent on Google's algorithm and where your site's going to get hit tomorrow. And I was a bit concerned about that. So I started to read and learn more about software, which was sort of a business model that seemed very attractive because of the whole monthly recurring revenue aspect. But at the same time was something I knew very little about. But kind of dove in head first, and that led to Ninja Outreach. And well, I'll pause there for now because that's kind of 2 years there.
Right, and I was going to say, so it sounds like you did that for a couple years, and you and I like met because of my blog in your blog. So you used to have sort of a marketing blog. Is it still out there at all?
It is not, because we eventually Ninja Outreach consumed it, and we just redirected all the links and traffic and articles to kind of send the traffic where it was valuable.
Got it. Okay. And I was blogging at Niche Site Project, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is I tell people, like, if you want to network with people, comment on blogs, send a couple emails, and that's literally what you and I did. Checked out each other's blogs, like, we were writing interesting things, and eventually you and I were in a mastermind group with another person for, I don't know, at least, I can't remember, like 6 months or maybe more. I don't remember.
Yeah. And eventually we met.
Yeah. We've met a couple of times, right? Yeah. Like I was passing through the Boston area, and then once you were coming through Atlanta. So yeah, we've hung out a couple of times, which is cool. I haven't met many people online. So,
either.
So yeah, like, comment on blogs because not many people do, and then send some emails, and you may develop some like multi-year long relationship, something like that. So cool. And I remember when you were getting started with Ninja Outreach, and I was like, I don't know, it sounds so complicated. And then like you went for it, right? So how did you get involved initially with Ninja Outreach? You obviously saw the need because you knew about guest posting and link building, but like you don't know software. So how'd you do it?
Yeah, it was tricky. One thing was basically, so influencer marketing was, how do you work with bloggers and influencers to kind of, build relationships and promote your brand. Originally, what I was thinking was, more like content promotion, because like you said, we were blogging, and I was thinking, how can we kind of get our content out there and maybe get it automatically posted in different forums and communities and the upvote sites and things like that. I started pitching that idea to a couple other bloggers to see if they might be interested in it. And they said that they thought it was okay of an idea, but that they were more interested in some sort of influencer marketing software. And I remember two like very prominent bloggers had said something like that. One was Brian Dean and the other was Matthew Barbie. And, those two inputs was sort of the impetus to think about influencer marketing and what was going on in that space. It was and still is like pretty hot. And basically there was some other software at the time, guys like InkyBee and BuzzStream, who, most of which are still around, that had a bit of a foothold in the space, but it didn't seem like anybody was really dominating it. So I started thinking about what that software could look like, what features should it had, and sort of how could, maybe I try to make it work. Unfortunately, I didn't know any coding and still really don't. And that was, the first big hurdle. And that's, often the one that kind of prevents most people from making the leap in the software. And I still haven't really figured out a good answer to how to deal with it, but I basically connected with another guy who had a developer friend, and he basically, the three of us joined in as kind of equal partners, and we got started kind of working. And there's a guy named Mark Sams, and I was a podcast guest on his show, and then he had a friend named Paul. And basically, that worked because, if you don't have a developer, like a co-founder, it becomes really expensive, like really fast. So having somebody, with equity in the business and stuff like that, was key. And basically, we started mapping out the MVP. We started trying to get the word out, asking people, were they happy with the software that they had available to them, trying to figure out who was using the competitors and sort of, maybe who wasn't the happiest customer and things like that. And I don't know if I don't know if it was easier then than it is now. Lately, I've also done some things with software, and I feel like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, people were a little bit more, accessible with email, and maybe a little bit more willing to meet and talk and chat about things. Maybe they just hadn't been quite like bombarded as they have in the last couple of years by a lot of sales pitches. But needless to say, we contacted a lot of people, generated some good phone calls, a little bit of buzz, did some blogging, and just kind of little by little started growing.
Cool. And with the partnership, right, especially with 3 people, how did you structure that from like a business standpoint? And did you meet those guys beforehand before you started, transacting and stuff?
So officially, officially, we eventually made it like a C corporation that was in America, basically in the States, in Delaware, which is a common state to kind of make a corporation, and they're both British. So I didn't have sort of easy access per se to meeting them, but we could basically all own 1/3 of the company, But I guess sort of unofficially in terms of, like division of labor and things like that, Mark and I were marketers, and then Gerpel was the coder. His job was very clear, and Mark and I just tried to split to-dos. Say, okay, you're gonna contact and talk with these people on the phone. I'm gonna contact these people on the phone. And in the early days, when the business was really quite small, there was more stepping on each other's toes. I'd say, just because it was harder to sort of draw a line in the sand about who was doing what, because it was a small business basically. I mean, it was never like a large business, but it was a particularly small business in the beginning. as it grew, like that division of labor became like more defined, and Mark started running almost purely the services side of the business, and I started working purely on like the software side of the business because it took on a little bit of a services model like a few years later, and he had certain employees that kind of worked with him, and I had sort of my guys, and in that sense, it worked out, you know, nicely. But basically, there was a lot of I guess trust and sort of faith that we kind of put into it in terms of, look, I don't really know you, you don't really know me, but we seem to share the same vision here, and you seem like a nice guy, and you know, let's give it a shot. And I'd say a lot of people would probably not recommend that approach. It's probably, you know, failed more times than it's worked, but I don't know. I had a good feeling about the guys. They seemed all right. So we went with it, and more or less it worked out reasonable. I didn't meet any of them until like 3 years into the business. Even after like it was, you know, things were clearly going okay and things were established. I still just had never really gotten around to meeting Mark. Still never met Paul. Eventually he did leave, and, you know, to work on other things. But I did meet Mark, you know, last year or so for the first time, and then not that long after we actually ended up selling the business. But basically, yeah. So again, it's sort of like the coding thing. I'm not sure. You know, the probably hurdle number 2 is how do I find a co-founder, right? And it's another one of those things where I say, unfortunately, I maybe kind of lucked into it. It worked out okay. I don't know if it would be like my advice to somebody else, but you know, sometimes you just have to go with those types of, you know, opportunities when they present themselves, right?
Yeah, and that's super interesting because, I mean, I think you're right. A lot more people are reaching out these days. I get a few emails a week, some sort of a pitch. So, like, it really has to be good for me to even reply back and not mark it as spam, like, to be honest with you. So if you can get, like, a warm introduction, and I mean, I think you demonstrated that with, you know, you were a guest on his podcast. So like you came in with some, you know, experience, you demonstrated value as a guest, and then you hit it off from there. So that makes some sense. And I was going to say it's interesting, right? You're right, because I don't think it's normal for people to be like, yeah, you know, you just meet someone, you talk a couple times, and like you move forward. It's like you're getting married, you're starting a business together, and then like you hope it works out. So yeah, it's really pretty amazing. Were there certain pieces, like especially in the early days, that were like much easier or harder than you expected?
Oh boy, I think in the early days, I think everything was kind of hard, and it was just kind of hard the whole time, and it never ever really got that easy. You know, it was I think we found good people. You know, we found good employees to kind of help us, and you know, mostly like through Upwork and things like that. You know, through freelancer marketplaces, and we'd kind of work with them, and then things would go well, and we'd kind of transition them into more of like a full-time role. And basically, you know, these good employees were just huge assets that really helped the company kind of grow, because I mean, again, pretty much anybody that's worked online has probably dealt with some freelancers that just kind of didn't pan out and just maybe were disappointed and they got burned a little bit. And then some people, you know, that really just say, well, that's it. I'm done. I'm never working with outsourced labor again. And I think that's kind of, you know, probably a mistake. But we had a couple of guys that we worked with in the beginning, and they stayed with us like the whole 4 years that we ran the company, which is fairly uncommon, you know, when you think about like outsourced labor. Usually people like they leave in like 6 months or something. So I think that, you know, the being able to find good help that was, you know, affordable for us, you know, really helped us. And then, you know, because often what we do is we would put a lot of work into maybe training people and kind of getting them up to speed. We'd get them kind of at, you know, pretty good rates because they didn't have a lot of experience, but they had like the right attitude, and we'd teach them kind of the marketing that they needed to know and that we needed from them. And then by the end of it, you know, 1-2 years later, I mean, the people were like all stars, but we were paying like probably a lot less than them than maybe other companies would. And I think that was really, really helpful for us. But we had invested a lot of time, you know, it wasn't like, you know, there was a give and take there. So I think that, you know, that was one thing for sure.
Cool. And do you have any tips for people like hiring on Upwork, for example, maybe your application process, interviewing, and the training piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of maybe two. Well, there's probably many different approaches, but one for sure is if you have something that's very specialized and you need a guy who's like he's an expert and you can't really mess around with training him. So you might need someone to run your paid advertising, to do something with say Google AdWords, and there's a lot of nuances there. It's fairly niche. It's its own marketing channel, and you're looking for a guy who's not just gonna like be learning while he's spending your money, right? And for that, you might pay kind of, quote unquote top dollar, a higher end freelancer and just kind of say, get it done. But then there's a lot of other, marketing, work that, if the guy has just the right attitude and he seems like he's willing to learn and he's got good command of English and, loyal, those types of things, then in more cases, than one, I'd be willing to kind of bet on that guy. Train them up a little bit, because at the end of the day, almost everybody needs to be trained anyway on sort of specifically what you want them to do, and then kind of, continue to work with them. And in that case, you often will find someone at a little bit of a discount rate, and then they'll learn to do exactly, what you'd like them to do. You can kind of, giving people a task right away and, that represents something that they'll be doing in the future, and kind of seeing how they run with it. And if it doesn't go well, probably, unless you really feel like this person has a lot of potential, you should kind of cut them probably pretty soon. And that way it's, there's no overinvestment on anybody's part. They always, I don't know, what do they say, like fire fast and stuff like that. I don't know. But basically, if you feel like it's not working out early on, don't force it. There's a lot of other people out there and you just find a better fit. Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people will come up with an excuse and you're like, okay, let it slide. But usually it's like 3 or so. Like there's always something else, and it's very rare. Like I'll give someone like one chance, but if it's like habitual, there's just too many people out there that want to work hard and are not going to be late. So yeah, I agree. So are there any people that, like, I guess looking back then and even now, that inspire you and you're like looking up to, and you're like, I like that path that they are on?
Yeah. I mean, there's not a person per se that I like follow sort of everything they do, but there are certain people that I kind of look at and I go, that looks like pretty neat. Like Spencer Hawes, I think is this, one of those guys that just, seems to sort of kill it with everything he does. Right. I mean, I know that must not really be the case. He's probably had his share of failures like everybody else, but I don't know. Everything from him is like, I started this niche site like 4 weeks ago and bam, sold it for 6 figures, and it's like that type of thing. But I just like that. Seems like a down to earth, nice guy. He's always working on a lot of different projects and things like that. He's not particularly flashy or salesy or markety, and he's, with all due respect, in my opinion, sort of an average writer. But he kind of just, he does a good job, and he's very transparent and honest with his audience. And he appears to do very well on a lot of different projects, and is always trying to try different things. And so he's a guy I've like over the years I've probably kind of followed a lot of his stuff more than others. Even though, he does, a lot more with sort of niche sites and affiliate sites and stuff like that, which is not as strong of an area for me, but still always interesting.
Cool. Anyone else you can think of? Or?
I don't know. There's a lot of guys I've just kind of, I've sort of seen a little bit, from here and there, but yeah, I mean, Sujan Patel from Mailshake is another one that he's a little bit more dedicated in the software space, and he has Mailshake and he has some other ones. And I've talked with him on the phone a couple of times because he was doing Mailshake when I was doing Ninja Outreach, and the two are kind of like competitors, but it's everybody's okay with each other. And again, always found him, despite the fact that like our companies could reasonably have overlap in terms of customers, be a very nice guy, be very willing to help, transparent and honest, and also seems to just kind of just be like a really great entrepreneur, and has a lot of projects, seems to do very well, and he's also doing a lot of updates, like personal like challenges, sort of like biohacking type stuff, like fasting for days and things like that. It's always really interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I don't follow him much. I need to check that out. You said Sujin Patel?
Yeah, it's Neil Patel's cousin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was going to say, I heard the name before, so I guess that's why. Gotcha.
You'll see him everywhere now.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so I've made like so many mistakes like on my journey, and I continue to make mistakes, like bigger ones as I go on. So do you have any to share that we can learn from?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, there's so many, I guess, to choose from, and a lot of them, you don't really know, and unfortunately, until you find out. And some of them are, sort of very specific, but they probably connect to a larger problem. So, for example, early on with Ninja Outreach, we made some killer mistakes, and I don't even know how we ever got out of it, but surely it cost us a lot of money. And one of them was that the application was desktop only. Only for Windows, not even for Mac. So, and also used only PayPal, so it couldn't accept credit cards. And it was like three very killer things that we did right away. And I have to say that, like, at the time, I thought, okay, I mostly use desktop. I don't use, I'm okay with not using a cloud app, and I also use Windows. So okay, I don't who uses Macs. And I have a PayPal account, so what's the big deal? And very quickly, your audience will let you know that you've made a huge blunder, and they say desktop. Like, what are you guys thinking? It's 2014. And Windows only. Like, we use Mac, and sorry, but PayPal doesn't work in this country. Like, can I use my credit card? Or like the business doesn't have a PayPal account or whatever it is, and these blunders, so they're sort of like specific from a bit of a technical perspective, but they really relate to just not really, I guess, either paying attention or researching your customer base or your potential customer base early on. I don't even really know how we kind of determined that it would be okay to have a Windows-only app. I think we looked on Wikipedia and we saw that like Windows had 90% of the market share or something, which maybe is true. I'm not saying that stat is wrong, but in our market, it was certainly like a 50-50 split. And it was like every other person that signed up said, oh, how do I download this for Mac? And it just didn't work. And then similar with PayPal, it's just another one of those things that at that time, this was years ago, but Stripe still existed, and they were the go-to payment processor for software. And basically, if we had even just put in a modicum of effort to ask another software entrepreneur, what payment processor are you using, or ask some of our customers, and any of this, would have saved us a lot of headache. And unfortunately, once you start to commit to these certain things, the act of kind of undoing it or reversing it is it's really hard. In fact, even years later, we sort of offered both PayPal and Stripe because we already had PayPal integrated, so why not? And then we added Stripe. And while that might seem like a fine solution to kind of offer both, it always made the analytics really difficult because people were they were stored in different back ends, and how do you track the conversions? And then you'd have tools like Barometrics that would only integrate with Stripe and not PayPal, so they'd only be capturing like a percentage of the customer base, and it was really unfortunate, And those types of things, I think, they represent the larger thing. Like I said, you have to kind of pay attention to your customer base, and if you don't know, ask another entrepreneur who's doing, software or niche sites or whatever it is, who's 1 to 2 years ahead of you, and be like, hey man, like, I'm sure you came across this question, like, what payment processor should you use? What did you use and why? And, the answer will, it'll be very clear.
Right. I totally forgot. I remember now, Dave, like, you were like, hey, you want to try the software? I'm like, I use a Mac. Like, I don't know. What are you doing? That's crazy. So, and then it was only after you guys migrated over that I was able to like test it out and whatever, like help you out then. So
yeah, exactly.
Damn. So I guess the main lesson there, ask people that are ahead of you. They probably know a little bit more. And yeah. Okay. Interesting. Now, I know you signed like an NDA and stuff selling the site, but can you share like just sort of like the scope or how big Ninja Outreach was when you sold it, just to give us some reference point?
Sure. I think at the time we were like around 20 or so employees. Most of them were around full time. There was maybe a couple part timers. I think we had, four or so developers and basically, certainly hundreds of customers. So we were around that size.
Okay, cool. And people can extrapolate or make assumptions based on that. But thanks for sharing. I totally understand. So what are you working on now?
So after selling the business in March, it's sort of a weird sort of feeling, I guess, where you all of a sudden like 90% of your responsibility is sort of removed and you're not exactly sure like what to do with your time. And I guess the advice I'd give to anybody who might be in a similar situation is, just see if there's anybody maybe you can try to help. Because, if you're working on a business or a startup, you've probably asked for your share of handouts and help, in the last couple of years. I know that I had, and I felt like it was kind of time to kind of give back a little bit. So basically, I offered to do some free consulting. This was like back in March, and that, connected me with one company. They're called Albatross. They're a B2B lead generation software, and they share some similarities with Ninja Outreach. So it's very comfortable and familiar, and they've just recently launched like a premium plan. So I've been kind of helping out with marketing on their side. And basically that's certainly one thing I've been working on. I have another software product that I bought last year. It's called Less Churn. Is churn reduction, basically helps software businesses reduce, user churn. That one is that's like Ninja Outreach like 4 years ago. It's almost even like Ninja Outreach like 6 years ago. Ninja Outreach didn't exist 6 years ago, so that kind of tells you what stage it's at. But basically trying to get that one off the ground, and I'll be honest that, even having built, a software business before, it ain't that much easier the second time. I mean, it's still really hard. It's still hard to get, users and traffic and all these different types of things. So anyway, I'm going to kind of give it the old college try, for at least a few more months and kind of see, how it goes. Ninja Outreach was a really tough start in the beginning as well. I mean, we did like a whole beta for several months. We launched it like nobody bought, and we were just, okay, like now what? I'm used to, things not taking off at like rocket speed. But, so we'll see how it goes.
Cool. Now, how do you stay motivated, like in the face of adversity, like you're describing here?
Yeah, I think that, one real benefit of having kind of done business for a few years and having had at least a few successes or so is hindsight. And there were millions of times with Ninja Outreach where I was just like, oh man, we're ruined. This is it. This competitors come out, their thing's a lot better, or these guys, they lowered their price, or we've just getting all this terrible feedback, and this project is delayed by so long. Or I've been traveling for like weeks without really proper internet, and I feel like I haven't like done a great job, and just all those types of entrepreneurial doubts and kind of hardships. Legitimately, those things, were, adversity, so to speak, and it was difficult. But now that I can kind of see the end result, that like, we did build a nice business, it more or less went reasonably well and was, reasonably smooth. We were able to sell it, and we were happy about the exit. And I think now I can kind of look back at all those times and say, well, hey, I wish I hadn't made all those mistakes with, PayPal and desktop, and that I had the internet for 3 weeks, maybe when I was complaining about it. But, it didn't prevent us from building something, great. And so now I can kind of say like, oh, hey, here we are again. It's another tough time, but, it's not, I know that little bumps in the road, and that's mainly what they are not enough to completely derail you off course. So that's sort of my attitude that kind of keeps me going, until I'm proven wrong.
Nice. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, I heard this analogy that, it was about brewing beer. So unrelated to what we're talking about, but it was about brewing beer, and, a beer brewer is like a carpenter, right? Like they're going to build a chair, and little mistakes are going to be made along the way. And as long as you can correct it as you go, and it still has 4 legs and a seat, maybe a back that's a little comfortable, you're probably going to be all right. And you don't have to have everything 100% perfect to the micro measurement or whatever. So as long as there's not a catastrophic mistake, then you're probably okay.
Yeah, so, I agree. It's doable.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's see. I'm just looking at my questions. Is there anything I should ask you? And we could edit this part out, of course. Is there anything you could think of you want me to ask?
No, I think that's, this covers the general story fairly well. Yeah, I can't think of any other questions.
Okay. Oh, I thought of one other.
Sure.
So a lot of people may be thinking, Dave, you built this company. You look kind of, sort of younger. You got a full head of hair, and everything. But you were traveling during this time. So people with kids and families and maybe a full-time job, they may be thinking, oh, you had it easy. You could put in 60 hours a week, but you were traveling across the world, right, during this 4-year period.
Exactly.
So where'd you go? Can you tell us a little about some of that stuff, some highlights of your travels?
Yeah, sure. So, basically, we were travelers before we were entrepreneurs, right? And for better or for worse, we kind of always try to manage both lives, which is difficult. It is difficult. I know it's travel, you're going to whatever exotic places and stuff like that. But I think anybody that knows that dichotomy of having multiple responsibilities and that feeling of maybe you're not always doing the best job in both places. It was like that with travel as well. Maybe it's not like kids, like you can't just, you could kind of stop it any day if you wanted to. But regardless, it was sort of tricky in that sense. But I certainly don't regret it because we got to see a lot of amazing things. We went to probably like 60 plus countries or so in the last 4 years. Basically all the continents except for Antarctica. A lot of really good, highlights and experiences and stuff. And, kind of like what I mentioned before, I guess with the bumps in the road, and there were so many times I just thought like, this isn't working. Like we can't travel and work at the same time and sort of pull it off. And again, maybe had we dedicated ourselves 100% to work, Ninja Outreach would have been bigger, had more employees, bigger exit, etc. But, the sacrifice would have been not so many experiences and stuff like that. So, you can kind of make it work. Even with a couple travelers, which was the travel blog I mentioned earlier. We started that when we were still working like, the 9-to-5 corporate job. And I just do kind of like nights and weekends and stuff. And the site got built and eventually it became attractive to buyers for links and stuff. And, it just takes time and you have to be patient. So I think, working on both, doing both things at once it is possible. You just have to be comfortable with things taking time. And, travel wise, obviously, if you are somebody who works, primarily online and have, can work remotely, I would definitely encourage you to kind of get out there. There's a lot of like community workspaces in countries all over the world. There's a lot of entrepreneurs and expats in different communities. I was in Barcelona recently. There's a bunch of people there. There's different groups like the DC, the Dynamite Circle, which is one place meant to connect sort of entrepreneurs globally. It's a good way to kind of change things up a bit.
Awesome. Cool. Well, where can people find you, Dave? Where do you want them to check out your stuff?
Sure. Well, look, if anybody's passing through Philadelphia, that's kind of where we're more or less settled now. And we're always kind of looking to meet, entrepreneurs and stuff like that. Basically my blog that I have now, that I'm working on getting a bit more active is daveschneider.me. My software that I mentioned is lesschurn.io. Albacross is the marketing, B2B lead generation company I work at. And, mainly I'm active just on email. Never been a big social media guy. So, it's just dschneid2010@gmail.com. I need like I used to have davidninjaoutreach.com, but now I don't. So I don't have like a better replacement email.
Cool. So normally I would have people, I would like get rid of your email address, but if someone listened to the whole thing, we'll reward them and you can reach out to Dave.
That's fine. So, yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot, Dave. Appreciate your time. And everyone go check out daveschneider.me, and we'll put links to Dave's stuff in the description and all that stuff. So thanks.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, thanks a lot for joining me on The Doug Show. I really do appreciate you taking the time. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. I have a ton of other episodes out there covering lots of different topics. Sometimes I just tell stories. If you are a long-time listener, I appreciate you too. If you haven't left a review, that is awesome, because now you have an opportunity to leave a review, and that would be totally cool, and I would really appreciate it. If you're looking to get started with affiliate marketing or making money online or anything like that, you should go over to nichesiteproject.com. That is my blog. Once you're over there, you just click the green button, enter your name and email address, and then I'll send you a bunch of cool stuff. I'll send you templates, some motivational emails, and I think there's probably just some random emails that I send out there also. So we'll catch you next time on The Doug Show. Thanks.